Right, we're at the semi-final stage of our best All-Ireland winners of the last 16 seasons. There's been a load of shocks along the way, but this semi-final is Kilkenny 2007 against Clare 2013. And just a little reminder, I'll just bring it up on screen here. Well, I have the wrong thing up on screen, but I'll get the right thing up here in a second. There it is, yeah. So the 2007 Kilkenny against Clare 2013, and then the other one, 2018 Limerick shocked 2010 Tipperary, and yet 2016 Tipperary shocked 2008 Kilkenny. So it is up to 2007 Kilkenny now. They're flying the flag for the Cats at this stage, and arguably the 2007 team was better than the 2008 team. Anyway, I would say in that the 2008 team produced that performance against Watford, but they really didn't beat a whole lot along the way. I mean, they hammered everyone, but maybe they did that in 7 as well.
I just have to say that I think this whole poll thing has proved that democracy does not rule. And as that puppet Gabbo famously said in The Simpsons, he just said, people are idiots. I know, it's interesting because it's just interesting when you put out to the public vote. Like if a county latches on to something, they, and it's no more than any sort of a vote or any sort of a even fundraisers there when you're doing karaoke things, and if people have a body of support, they can kind of go an awful long way. And some of the teams in here, like I would have thought Kilkenny 2008 were definitely going to be in the final at least, and they were beaten at the quarter-final stage, and no back door. No back door. Once they were gone, they were gone. But it's an interesting little duel. Definitely, I'm sure we'll go into it a bit more. Definitely a clash of styles. Like if you look at, how direct Kilkenny were, the way they played the game was quite old school. And then when Clare won the All Ireland in 2013, everybody thought hurling was going to change. The addition of a sweeper at times, depending on who they were playing, sitting quite deep, all pace, carrying the ball an awful lot, and basically not really striking in the ball until lads were in a good bit of space, and it was going to be very advantageous for them. So while it didn't actually happen, it would have been such an interesting clash of styles between the two.
Not to mention you have Brian Cody against Davy Fitz, and Davy Fitz was obviously in an earlier stage of his career. He was probably early 40s at this point, but I think it's very much worth pointing out that we're talking about the 2 years in isolation. If you're talking about the body of work of these teams over the course of years, as I've said many times, Clare did nothing for 5 years either side of this All-Ireland win, but they did reach a level that was unbelievable that year. Of course, this was year 3 out of the 4 in a row for Kilkenny, and obviously they had the year in 2010 when they lost, and they won a couple more after that again. So it's not even up for debate which team did more in the longer run. But there are a couple of great matchups. I mean, you have talked about that clash of styles, and definitely how would Kilkenny have dealt with the sweeper? How would they have dealt with that speed in Croke Park? That'd be very I think that's one of the biggest kind of letdowns over the course of the lifetime span of that Clare team, is that we never got to see them up against Kilkenny at Croke Park. But there's certain sort of matchups I'd have loved to have seen, like Shane O'Donnell. How would he have done against Noel Hickey? Shane O'Donnell who scored that famous hat-trick. Cha Fitz against Colin Galvin, I think, is mouth-watering. Like we've talked in a previous matchup where it was Kilkenny 2011 against Clare 2013, Brian Hogan against Tony Kelly. That'd be brilliant. There are an awful lot of really tasty looking matchups here, because like Podge Collins and Conor McGrath, for example, who's going to keep into them?
Yeah, no, and kind of what we were saying about the clash of styles there, you put Shane O'Donnell, kind of silky speed, that killer instinct in front of goal, and you put him up against Noel Hickey, who at this stage, like looking back like 13 years ago, he's an old school fullback at this stage. Like maybe it's been a bit harsh and just throwing it out there. Like, would Noel Hickey survive in the modern game?
Yeah, well, that's the way the game's gone. I mean, these days it isn't just a fullback who can stand there and man the square. You are isolated against the fastest, probably most dangerous forward with great ball going in. You have to be all things to all men, fast, strong. Like obviously he has the strength, but you need to be able to keep into a speed merchant too.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. If Shane O'Donnell was playing full forward now on that Kilkenny team back then and marking someone, I don't think he'd be marking Noel Hickey. I think Noel Hickey could be playing cornerback, and Jackie could conceivably be playing fullback because he had that bit more mobility to him. So I think that's a really, really interesting duel. Like two completely different styles of play. And like even like I was chatting to James Barry recently enough, the retired fullback from Tipperary, and he said like he never picked up O'Donnell. He was always happier if Barrett played fullback and if he played cornerback, and Barrett picked up O'Donnell maybe at fullback or something like that. He was because that was just what he said. Even during the course of his career, he said hurling had changed that much. I wasn't the fullback that was going to be driving out with ball. They were putting this nippy lad in on me. So Noel Hickey having Shane O'Donnell coming in would have been very, very interesting. You mentioned Colin Galvin and Cha Fitz, like probably two of the great stylists of the game in the last 15 or 20 years. Both beautiful on the ball. Like I'd say you could count on one hand the number of times either of them ever gave away the ball when they had it in their hand. And it was just, they looked so composed and looked like they had so much time on the ball. Another really, really interesting duel, I think, would be Martin Comerford and Brendan Bugler. Brendan Bugler, very, how should we say, outward in showing, that he had done something good or done something inspirational for his team with the fist pump or whatever going in the air. Martin Comerford, probably the opposite. The only time I really saw him celebrating anything was after he scored a goal against Tip in 2009, which I hate bringing up. And so he was kind of the silent type that just went and did his job and was unbelievably effective. Had the aerial ball winning ability, had the point scoring ability, was also really, really mobile as well. So it would have been really, really interesting, the two of them coming against each other in the half hour line.
Just to jump back to that full back point again, I'm pretty sure actually James Barry marked Shane O'Donnell in 2017 down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. But that aside...
Yeah, I know, but he said he wouldn't be best served marking him. So as things went on, they realised that, okay, Barrett might be better picking up the Alan Cadigan or the Shane O'Donnell. I might be better picking up John Conlon, if you know what I mean.
And it's insane that they needed to learn the hard way to do that, because it's just pretty obvious. You don't put a speed merchant on a guy who's not able to keep into a speed merchant and vice versa. But anyway, that aside, that Clare full forward line, I'll bring the teams up here actually. I'll just make sure I have the Clare one up here first. But when you're talking about all that speed, you're making me think, how would Kilkenny organise their full back line? Who would you want Noel Connors or Noel Hickey on there? Podge Collins, who was in Hurler of the Year form up until the All-Ireland final replay when he was taken off, and I think he just lost the gong because of that. Shane O'Donnell and Conor McGrath. I don't know which of the three of those you want to put him on. Is there a possibility that Noel Hickey might have even dropped out of the team on the basis that he didn't quite have his physicality, his whatever his attributes are, wouldn't match up too well there? Or did Kilkenny just back themselves?
Yeah, I think the latter. I think we've been we've been generous somewhat to Clare. Would they have gotten the ball to their full forward line, which is debatable enough? Would they have been able to break down that half back line? The only thing I would say is, if you go back through history, Kilkenny haven't been the best to adapt to something different that's been thrown at them there and then. When they get time to analyse it and come up with a strategy, brilliant. Like, so just say Clare in 2004, when Clare played Alan Markham as the sweeper, Dalo played him as the sweeper, they nearly beat them in an All-Ireland quarter-final. Had it sussed out for the replay and were able to beat them. They struggled for a long, long time when Tip really fronted up to them in 2009. And were able to pull away, but Tip eventually had their number. They struggled massively with Wexford's sweeper. Took them a couple of years, I'd say, to get the grips with it. You know what I mean? So the old traditional elements coming against non-traditional, they weren't the best to quickly adapt to it. So it would have been interesting. This was Clare's style was radical enough for that time. So it could have been the sort of thing where Kilkenny were a bit shell-shocked after maybe 20 minutes, and they could have leaked them maybe a goal or two, but then they got into the game and were able to sort out things on the field. But it would have been interesting. I think we've been generous to Clare in saying, oh, who's Noel Hickey going to pick up? I don't know. Maybe Kilkenny would have just battened down the hatches in the half-back line. Brian Hogan would have sat back, sweeping in front, and Derek Ling maybe or whoever might have sat back playing centre-back, and they would have just shored things up that way.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I will just run through the rest of that Clare team while we're here. Patrick Kelly in goals, Donal O'Donovan, David McInerney, Cian Dillon, Brendan Bugler, Patrick Donlan, Patrick O'Connor, Colin Galvin and Conor Ryan, who was actually centre back, and Patrick Donlan was out midfield. John Conlon, Tony Kelly, Colin Ryan, and as you said, Podge Collins, Shane O'Donnell, Conor McGrath. So to look at the Kilkenny team then, it's fairly powerful team. PJ Ryan in goals, Michael Kavanagh, Noel Hickey, Jackie Tyrrell, Tommy Walsh, Brian Hogan, JJ Delaney, what a half-back line. Derek Ling and James Cha Fitzpatrick, and Cha was brilliant at the time. Willie O'Dwyer, Martin Comerford, Owen Larkin. Larkin will be hurler of the year just a year later. And then what a full forward line. Eddie Brennan, Henry Shefflin and Aidan Taggy Fogarty. So best of luck to Clare trying to keep into that forward line.
Yeah, and even just looking down through the Kilkenny subs that were used that day, John Tennyson came on for Noel Hickey, who went off injured, was carrying a hamstring into it. Nick Fenley came on at half time, and Richie Power came on after 26 minutes when Henry went off with the cruciate. Just a couple of other subs that they had that day, James Ryle, Mick Rice, TJ Reid. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of what you're dealing with. Kilkenny were actually, that Kilkenny team was that good as well that they were able to lose their talisman at half time, and basically they were still able to win comfortably.
If I'd like to look at the paths that the two teams went down that year. So you have the Clare one, but I'll just quickly run through the Kilkenny one here. So they battered your Offaly boys 127 to 113, so that's by 14 points. Then Wexford for the first time, that was 15 points. Then 322 to 118 over Gerlach Nan's Galway, so 10 points, and 10 again against Wexford. So they basically beat the pick of Leinster a couple of times, Galway, and then played against Limerick in the final. And I think if we're honest, even though Limerick did shock Waterford in that semi-final that year, that was a Waterford team who of course had to play a second time against Cork, and I think were a bit flat. Waterford had battered them in the Munster final. I don't think that they beat the best Munster team, and obviously didn't beat, well, Tip and Cork weren't exactly at the very, very height of it at the time. But you would have to say they just battered before them a bunch of fairly average teams.
Just on the final, like, we battered Limerick in the qualifiers the year after, and we weren't exactly pulling up trees. Like, we beat them well down the Gaelic grounds the year after. So, like, that maybe that's a sign of the quality that Kilkenny beat along that year. But Clare's passage is a little bit different. Played 8 games. They beat Waterford by 8, lost to Cork in the first of 3 meetings with them, lost by 8. Hammered Laois in Ennis, where everybody scored, bar Donald O'Donovan, who scored the famous point, obviously, in the All-Ireland to draw it the first day. Beat Wexford after extra time. That was the day Mossy Waters went down, and it was a big kind of a turning point. Did Clare get a goal while he was down, I think?
Yeah, pretty sure they did, but it could have been Colin McInerney, but I might have the wrong man.
They beat Galway in Thurles then by 6 points in the All-Ireland quarter-final when Galway couldn't handle the sweeper at all. The same way Limerick caught Waterford in 2007, Clare kind of caught Limerick in 2013. All the expectation was on Limerick going into that semi-final. Declan Hannon missed a load of frees, and they were beaten by 7, but beaten pretty comprehensively. They drew with Cork, obviously, the first day in an epic, and then beat them in an epic as well. Didn't beat Tipperary along the way. Didn't beat Kilkenny along the way. Cork obviously beat Kilkenny in 13. So you could say maybe a lot of the legwork was done for them. A lot of people, you'd obviously say as well, that you thought Dublin were probably the best team in Ireland that year as well. So a lot of teams, Cork beat Kilkenny and Dublin, and Tipperary weren't on their game in 13 at all. So you'd have to question what Clare beat in a way along their passage too.
Yeah, no, I'm with you all the way on that one. Who do you think are the main men that Clare would have to shut down here? I mean, Cha obviously.
Where do you start? Where do you start and where do you finish? I think Kilkenny would have a lot less players to try and shut down. I think if Kilkenny shut down Tony Kelly and Podge Collins, they would be doing definitely in the forward line, and obviously Shane O'Donnell as well. But we didn't obviously know it. You wouldn't be, if Shane O'Donnell was starting, he's not someone you'd be targeting. You would have been targeting in 13 because you didn't know anything about him. But when you go down through the list of Kilkenny boys that they need to stop, like in that 07 final, Eddie Brennan went to town on Seamus Hickey. Obviously, Shefflin is Shefflin. Owen Larkin scored 4 points. Comerford. Then you have Richie Power coming off the bench. You have Derek Ling, the enforcer. You have the whole half back line. Like, if whatever about the forwards, then saying how many lads you have to stop in Kilkenny, like, really, you have to stop their platform on the half back line. And I just think, like, you can't compare the Clare half back line and the Kilkenny half back line. You can't compare it, to me, the Kilkenny forward line and the Clare forward line. I think there's way more players to shut down on the Kilkenny side.
No, that is kind of true, and I think Jackie Tyrrell, he would have marked the likes of Damien Hayes at different stages of his career, done well on him, done well on Lara Corbett. I think he possibly would have been able to do to Podge Collins what Brian Murphy had done to him in that final in the second day. I think John Conlon, I think he could have made an impact, especially that bit of power, and maybe that's where Noel Hickey would have gone. Maybe he would have marked him no matter where he was going to be playing in the team. But yeah, it's hard to disagree with you there. There's just so many weapons on that Kilkenny team. But there's this thing is, like the way Davy Fitz pulled Shane O'Donnell out of a hat, and he did such damage. What would he pull out of the hat here? Would he have pulled something tactically out of the hat? Like, I mean, Galway didn't see Patrick Donnellan coming as a sweeper in that quarter final, and obviously he had such a great impact, especially at the start of the replay, solo and through, helping set up the goal. But yeah, I just think eventually, if Clare even got themselves in a winning position, Kilkenny would have done their Catenaccio thing, where they bring all the midfielders back, bring the wing backs back, and absolutely stifled Clare out of it, took them into a war, and physically that Kilkenny team is going to batter most teams, never mind a team that has a lot of players that are 5'8" and built accordingly.
Yeah, I think you kind of summed it up there. Kilkenny will be fairly forewarned of what's going to come, and I think the full backline would all mark their men. 3 halfbacks would mark their men, and Brian Hogan would sit. The midfielders would come really deep. The half-forward line would come really deep. You'd see, I think you probably would have seen something like what Limerick are doing now. They just would have clogged up I think they would have clogged up all that space. They would have been fearful enough of Clare coming into the game. I think Cody would have taken the necessary steps. They would have maybe gone ultra defensive, maybe ultra negative for the first 20-25 minutes, stifled them, and then been able to open up a bit more. But it would have been really, really interesting. That's, as you said earlier, it's the one pity of probably the last 10 years anyway, 10 or 15 years, that the great Kilkenny team, maybe they weren't as great in 2013-14, but it's a pity that they didn't get to play Clare, because that was all the talk at the time. It was a new era. A new era is dawning under Davy. Cody is how should we say, old-fashioned, he's whatever, and it just would have been really interesting if the two of them come together. And like I said to you before, like Jackie said in his book, like a big motivation for them in the winter of 13 and coming into 14 was, we're finished. We're not able to keep up the speed. Me and Tommy and these boys were all been written off, and it would have just been great if they come up against each other. But even just talking like that in a kind of a virtual sense of what would have happened, I think it's very, very interesting, because there's a lot of kind of ponderables on it. But I still think Clare would have had to do too many things unbelievably well to shut down Kilkenny. I just don't think it would have happened.
Yeah, at the same time, I don't know if a team throughout its life cycle has ever just had, like, because they were so average for so long, but such a dramatic peak for 1 year. So I think that has to give them some sort of a puncher's chance. I mean, if Kilkenny were anyway kind of off their game, and you're against the Clare team playing with that pace, get a couple of goals ahead, force Kilkenny out, I don't know, they could do a nice bit of damage on them. But we'll put it out to the public. I don't know if you have any final thoughts, but I'd be going Kilkenny 07 all the same.
No, I agree with what you're saying, though. When a team gets momentum like that, like if they'd played them in 13 and Clare were going that well, Clare were never going that well again. That team was never going that well again. But do you know when a team is on like the crest of a wave and they just feel unstoppable, and Kilkenny they've had a couple of weeks to prepare for him, but they wouldn't have had a whole winter where they're analysing tape and doing all this and this. So like the more than if Butterbean faced off against Evander Holyfield is going to be smart and boxman or whatever, but if Butterbean lands a shot, that's it. So they have a chance.
I don't think Butterbean will last 70 minutes, by the way. Okay, so we're going to put out the vote on OurGame.ie, and we'll see who gets through to the final round.